Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and today we have some spoilers for Campaign 3 of Critical Role, like normal on Tuesday. However, I don't know how spoilery this one is, because we've known about this for a while, but spoilers nonetheless for up to episode 111 of Campaign 3 of Critical Role. So if you aren't caught up, I recommend clicking off, getting caught up, and eventually making your way back to this video if you remember by the time you catch up. I don't know where you are in the campaign. You might be in episode 30. That's a long time. You might not want to watch this video by the time you get back here. But who knows? Spoilers. Last warning. As of episode 111, both the teams of the Bells, Hells, and the Mighty Nine have made it to the city of Kavirus, which means very shortly, in no time at all, maybe within the next episode, the three combats between the three campaign groups will begin. The story has been building towards this moment for a while now, where all three of the groups will simultaneously attack their targets, making it a little bit easier for each of them so that one group doesn't get reinforcements to run up on them. But we've been building towards this for a while now, and it got me thinking about who has the hardest and who has the easiest fight of the three coming conflicts. So that's what today's video is about. Who of the three groups is going to have the hardest, potentially campaign-ending fight? So I think it only makes logical sense for me to start listing off the three fights that will be happening simultaneously. First is going to be the Vox Machina leading the forces of Exandria to attack the Malleus Key against Ozo Kruth and basically the entire army of both the Ruby Vanguard and Ruidus. So that's one massive fight, possibly the most true war-esque type fight that we will be seeing in the upcoming events. Next up is the Mighty Nine versus the Weavemind, the five leaders of Ruidus, the people who directly serve and give out the will of Predathos, the leaders of Ruidus. And finally, the long-awaited fight that has been being built toward throughout the entire campaign, the Bells Hells versus Ludinus Deleth. Hopefully this time, truly Ludinus Deleth and not some sort of simulacrum. So how do we determine which group is going to have the hardest time with their adversaries? Well, I think there's two ways to go about it. One, we could go over the known abilities of each of the enemies and sort of determine the abilities based on, the players, how they could handle things. Or we could do the more realistic thing, because going over the entire party of every group is kind of a pain in the ass. And we don't really know all that much about Ozo Kruth, his army, and we don't know too much about the Weavemind. We do have some good information about Ludinus. However, I think it makes more sense to look at the power structure that is in place within the Ruidus army. It makes more sense to sort of look at what is the power structure and who's in charge of who, and from there we can determine what we think is the most realistic out of what combat will be the hardest and the easiest. So at the top of the power structure, it's pretty simple. We can put the Weavemind right there. They're the ones in control of basically anyone on Ruidus. Rylorans, doesn't matter what race you are, all of the races on this moon are controlled by them. They have some sort of power over them, whether it be the mind ships, whether it be their army literally enforcing their rules. They are the enforcers, the leaders of Predathos. They're the ones who are in control of everyone, and they enforce the will of Predathos. If you wanted to put someone above them, it would literally have to be Predathos, their god of sense. So they are the only ones at the top of the pecking order, realistically. Below them is obviously Ozo Kruth. If they are the leaders of everyone, he is part of everyone. That means they are above him. He is the leader of their armies. Like, he physically is the person who goes out to fight with their army. So he is the top of the pecking order aside from them, but they are still obviously above him. Where you put Ludinus is the interesting part. Ludinus would likely have you believe he's either above the Weavemind or with the Weavemind on equal footing as a representative of Predathos. But we all know that's likely not the truth. He's likely either equals or below them. And I would think it's more reasonable to say that he's below them. They have been the ones to sort of guide him to the point where he is now. Without them, he wouldn't really be here. And honestly, I don't think he has what it takes to match their strength. He does have a lot in his arsenal, and a lot of it is truly unknown. We don't know what he's used the harness / funnel to use or to absorb over the years. So he has pretty well an unknown kit for the most part. But they're far more unknown, and they seem to be far more powerful and omnipotent. We don't know quite what they can do. We have a bit more of an understanding of Ludinus. Something tells me Ludinus would get stomped out by the Weavemind. So realistically, I think it makes more sense that as far as power structure goes, it goes the Weavemind, below them, like in power order, would be Ludinus, and then Ozo Kruth. With that being said, I would like to sort of look at the fights that we're going to be seeing and in the context we will be seeing them. Obviously, Vox Machina will be fighting Ozo Kruth, who is the lowest on the totem pole I just mentioned. So realistically, that means it's the easiest fight, right? Well, yes, it is going to be the easiest fight in my opinion, but not just because Ozo Kruth is the lowest on the totem pole. The Vox Machina crew also have the armies of Exandria behind them, and they're going to be in the truest, most form of a war setting. So they're going to be the ones fighting a mass army, and they're going to be the ones going up against the most amount of people, but those people are likely way weaker than all of them, right? Vox Machina as a crew is a bunch of level 20, let's just say lesser gods, because once you're level 20, you are a lesser god. So realistically, all of these vestige-wearing lesser gods are running into this combat, and they're going to be fighting a bunch of scrubs until they reach Ozo Kruth and a handful of the more dangerous things towards the center of the Malleus Key. But I do think that they have insane kits, they have insane weapons, items, they're insane levels. Keyleth is basically unkillable. She at level 20 has unlimited wild shapes, and they can be bonus actions because she's a Moon Druid, and I hate Moon Druid, and I think there's a video on this channel that describes my hatred for Moon Druid. But realistically, they're going to be unkillable, especially if Liam is going to be playing as Liev Tel, which means they're not going to have just one cleric and Pyke, they're going to have two clerics with Pyke and Liev Tel. So realistically, this group, not killable. Like, this group is going to be perfectly fine going in. They're not going to die. Very likelihood of them dying is low, so realistically, this is going to be an easy fight. Not necessarily an easy fight. I do think they're going to get hurt, but I don't think they're going to be at risk of anyone being killed off here, or at least anyone important to Vox Machina. There is going to be maybe some NPCs who die off in the distance or something like that, but something tells me Vox Machina themselves are going to be able to sort of run through this area. They might have a bit of an obstacle in Ozo Kruth himself, but I feel like they're going to take him out pretty easily. They've fought a lot of very strong beings in the past, and something tells me he's not quite Vecna. So this leaves us with our final two fights, which would be Ludinus versus the Bell's Hells and the Weavemind versus the Mighty Nine. And I have to pick which one's going to be harder of these two, and it's kind of close. Like, these two are a lot closer, in my opinion, than the Vox Machina versus Ozo Kruth at the Malleus Key. I think the Malleus Key fight is almost a foregone conclusion. It's just going to be really fun for us to watch it. That being said, these fights are a lot more interesting and more difficult. So we have the Mighty Nine fighting the Weavemind, who are a completely unknown. However, the Mighty Nine are completely unknown to the Weavemind as well. So there is a mild bit of unknown to both sides here, because the Weavemind are likely more concentrated on the Bell's Hells. That being said, I do think the Weavemind versus the Mighty Nine is going to be the easier of the two fights. So why do I think this fight is going to be a little bit easier than the Bell's Hells versus Ludinus? And the reason is simple. Again, this group, the Mighty Nine, is level 20. And again, they have two Titanic healers on this team. And they also have a Titanic wizard. This wizard is probably one of the strongest individuals alive in Exandria. He is a monster. And not to mention, they have one of the most insane multi-classes standing next to them in Ford, who is a Hexblade Paladin, who is disgustingly powerful if he wants to be. So realistically, this group has just a ton of power, they have a ton of hitting power, and they have a ton of heals. I just don't see them being in too much of an issue. Not to mention, with the bonuses they got from Heroes Feast, they're going to be pretty well off when making saves against anything that the Weavemind are going to try to do with mind fuckery. So in all honesty, the only real issue would have been Yasha, but Caleb made sure she was protected from it as well. So realistically, not too many things are going to get in the way of the Mighty Nine running over the Weavemind. That being said, the Weavemind does have one thing to their advantage. It is their location, and they can control the people of Ruidus. And I think that this puts a time limit on the fight before reinforcements do eventually show up, and the Ruidus people, the Rylorans or other people and other races born on Ruidus, will eventually show up and try to fight the Mighty Nine alongside with the Weavemind. So I do think there is a time limit here. However, I do think there is a counterpoint to be made for that, and that is the Volition. The Volition is likely going to go after their target, and their target is the Weavemind. And I do believe they will be running defense against the reinforcements for the Weavemind. So I do think this time limit is a real thing. and it's whether or not they can kill the Weave Mind before the Volition is killed off themselves. And I think that's a very interesting sort of question to look at. Again, we don't know too much about the Volition and what they're capable of. We do know they blew up a theater filled with Exalted Rootasborn, so they have to have something up their sleeve. So realistically, who knows? I do think that this fight is going to be a lot easier for the Mighty Nine because they are very powerful in their own right. I didn't even mention the fact that they have a little rogue who likes to sit back and snipe people. So realistically, they have a lot up their sleeves in terms of what they can do. And they're very well guarded against what likely is going to be the best tool of the Weave Mind, and that is their mind-affecting abilities. So I just think they're in a really good spot to fight the Weave Mind. So realistically, it's going to be the second easiest fight. So that obviously means that I think the hardest fight, and I mean this in the slimmest of margins of hardest fight. I do think that the Mighty Nine are going to have a hard fight, but I think this fight is slightly harder for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, they're level 15. The Bell's Hells are just level 15, and I don't think they're going to be leveling up again before they fight Ludinus at the Hollowed Cage. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think it's very likely that they're going to speed this level for the rest of the campaign. Unless the campaign gets extended by another 30 episodes because Predathos is released. Who knows? That's a completely different thing. Along with this group being the lowest in level, the enemy also knows them the most out of either fight. So realistically, it is a fight between two groups, Ludinus and Bell's Hells, that know each other really well based on the fact that they fought a handful of times. Ludinus has now seen Ash's elemental form. I don't think he saw Fern's. He may have. He might also be watching them, so he might just have seen it out and about anyway. Also, he's well aware of some of the equipment that they have now. The only unknown that Ludinus would truly have is if they start using the funnel or the harness to absorb things just before they get to him. If they choose to do that, they will have some stuff in their kits that he doesn't even know, because we won't even know them truly. So realistically, for the most part, Ludinus knows the Bell's Hells really, really well. The Bell's Hells know him a good amount. We do know his HP, which is around, I think it's around 290 to 340, somewhere in that range. We also know his AC, and we also know his intelligence, which is 22 to 23. So we are well aware of some of the stuff that he can do. We also know about some of his abilities and his magic that he can cast. So we do have a lot of information about Ludinus. However, Ludinus also has a handful of massive unknowns, because it is unknown how much power he gained from using the harness himself. If he had a second harness made that's even better, we don't know. And we don't know who's going to be with him. We are likely going to see Liliana, but we don't know if Liliana is going to be on the side of good or the side of bad or on her own side. Whether or not any of that's true, who knows? Again, it's an unknown. There is the most unknowns in this fight, because Ludinus could have a bunch of Exaltants with him, he could have a bunch of Rylorans with him, he could have Liliana with him, he could have made a deal with anybody. Realistically, he could have made deals with anybody else in the Cerberus Assembly who have elected to, dip from the Cerberus Assembly and join him. There are a bunch of people and unknowns that we don't know about the fight with Ludinus that I truly think makes it a hard fight. We do have a lot of information on him. However, how strong he truly is, because we've only been seeing him at a half strength, or at least half health, but we haven't been seeing him at his maximum, and this will likely be considered his lair. So he's likely going to be able to also have lair actions, which is very dangerous. So he's going to have legendary resistances, legendary actions, legendary or lair actions. So going to be a very difficult fight here. Not to mention, there are many other unknowns that could be there. Where the fuck did Ira go? Ira Windigoth is currently MIA, and we know he hates Ludinus, but he also wants to be like a powerful person and known for his own intelligence and power himself. So I have a feeling that he would likely be a third party in this fight, much like how I can see Liliana doing the same. So there might be 4 fucking sides to this fight at one point if Ira decides to show up. Maybe he went to the Unseelie and he's like, hey, I got an idea for us. We can mess with these people and win on our own right. So realistically, who knows what's going on with this fight? This fight is, to me, the most unknown because there are so many variables, because this is the Campaign 3 fight. This is the Campaign 3 fight, so it's had the most build up to it. So many things can happen in this fight. And I do think, yes, it makes a lot of sense for this to be the hardest. They are the weakest of all the groups. They're fighting an enemy that they have a decent amount of info of, but not like all of his info. So again, this fight has a ton of knowns and unknowns, and it's the campaign 3 fight. It just makes sense that this would be the hardest. So there you have it. That's who I think is going to have the hardest fight, the Bell Cells, and who I think is going to have the easiest fight, Vox Machina. Now, I'm curious to know what you guys think. I get the feeling a lot of people are going to actually flip the Mighty Nine fight and the Vox Machina fight. I get the strange feeling that a lot of people are going to be like, well, campaign 1 was the first campaign, so it makes sense that they wouldn't have like the hardest fight. But I personally just think that Ozo Kruth doesn't have the same like oomph that the Weave Mind does. And the fact that they're with an entire army who's going to be able to take off a large portion of the load, and they're with a bunch of NPCs from across all 3 campaigns, something tells me that this fight's going to be a little easier than the rest. But that's just me. I'm curious to what you guys all think. And yeah, I'm excited to see what you guys think in the comment section. And with that, I'll see you guys on Friday for the recap of episode 112. So until then, peace.